Absolutely, man. It's complete silence, because our first concern is Tua. At the end of the day, man, football, it's a game. But, we're human beings, outside of this game, and we all have feelings. So in that moment, I think you saw how everyone felt about Tua. He's, the captain on his team and a leader, and guys have so much respect for him. So, the silence, man, was, just guys showing their concern.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I am Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry and Jay Croucher. Fellas, we have a lot to get through today, but no better place to start than Thursday Night Football, where, gotta be honest, we have to start with
Are you sure?
The best for Tua.
Are you sure that's where you want to start?
It's absolutely.
We're at a massive table. We're at the biggest table of all time.
I wanted to see how long we can go without addressing it. No. You didn't allow it at all.
I got here, we were on this small little table. We were basically all making out with three people. We're like, we need a bigger table.
Yes.
And they were like, all right, F you, Barry. We're going to get you a big table. We're gonna put it in the entire, we had to build a whole nother wing.
The ends are out of the shot.
Right out of the shot. Yeah, you can't even see. We still have the pinball machine. You can't even see it here. Let's paint this red, and suddenly, we're like Jada Pinkett Smith.
So you love it?
What?
So you obviously love it. Jay, what are your thoughts?
I just think I ruined the Sixth Sense and Fight Club yesterday, and now we get this ship.
Yeah, exactly.
The ship.
Yeah, 100%. I just enjoy this table today. That's all I'm going to say, boys.
I feel like by the end of the show, we're going to be buried all the way behind it. It's just going to be you two again as a normal.
Is that Matthew Berry?
It is. It's a little hi.
We're screaming at each other.
We're not. It is a little bit. It is a little bit like some of those joke tables that you see in movies where you're just it's two people at the very end of each, a super long table, and there's two people at the very end. I'm trying to think of where's a movie that you've seen that scene?
I'll think about it.
What spoiler you got for us today?
Yeah, I'll tell you how that scene ends.
I feel like there's a scene like that in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, but I could be wrong on that one.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that one. We do a whole podcast on Dirty Rotten Scoundrels because there's nothing but twists in that movie, and you can just spoil 18 different things in that particular movie, Jay Croucher. All right, Connor, let's. All right.
So you want to do Thursday Night Football?
Let's talk Thursday Night Football.
Let's talk Thursday Night Football. Obviously, best wishes to Tua and his recovery.
That was awful.
Terrible to watch, quite frankly. 50 times in a row, it felt like we watched it.
A lot of the replay. I'm just going to say this. I know there's a lot of discussion out there about should he have been playing and the concussion protocols, and did the Dolphins go through the proper steps? Should he have been cleared to play? Should he have cleared to come back on Sunday? Should he have been? I get all those conversations, and those are really important conversations. And by the way, Mike Florio did a deep dive on that this morning on Pro Football Talk. You go listen to that, find that, profootballtalk.com. That's not our show. No. Our show is about fantasy football and big tables. That's what we do here. And so what I would say here is I just want to focus on two things. Number one is that I think I speak collectively for the three of us and everyone that works on the Fantasy Football Happy Hour, that is prayers for Tua, right?
Yes.
That looked awful. And we are most importantly hoping for that young man's safety, and that the initial reports were good, that he flew home with a team, and and has movement in his extremities. So that's all awesome, and we are prayers up for Tua. And then the second thing is just fantasy football wise, if the Dolphins are without Tua Tagovailoa, what does this offense look like under Teddy Bridgewater for however long Tua may or may not be out?
That's the biggest thing. How big of a change is it? We know they have a mastermind in Mike McDaniel. We know they have arguably one of the most fun wide receiver duos we've seen in a long time. But under center, how much of an impact is there?
Yeah, I think it caps their upside to some extent, because Tua, just because he's less proven and less known, has more upside, and he was phenomenal in the first 3 weeks. But at the same time, Teddy Bridgewater is about as good as a backup quarterback there is out there. He was solid for Denver, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He also threw the ball 61 yards in the air last night to Tyreek Hill, which is ridiculous. So I think that Tyreek Hill is, at this point, basically quarterback agnostic. Tyreek Hill is just going to deliver, but obviously it caps their upside.
Do you agree with that?
I do. I do. But I think for our purposes, which is, are we still starting Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill? Yes. We are. Yes. I mean, that's the answer. And is their value going to remain more or less the same? I was encouraged by that big bomb that you mentioned there. By the way, that was a 64-yard completion. It went 61.4 air yards per season, as you see it here on your screen for those watching live on Peacock or on demand, as Teddy Bridger goes back. And so check down
Is that
Teddy.
Justin Herbert?
No, exactly. He chucks it long. It's a little bit of a bobble, but Tyreek Hill comes down with it. Ultimately, that is a 64-yard completion from Bridgewater to Tyreek Hill, and that is the longest completion by air yards this season by any quarterback in the NFL. Not Josh Allen. Not Aaron Rodgers, not Mahomes.
Teddy B.
Check
down Teddy.
Check down Teddy has that. So I think that given this offense, that McDaniel's going to be like, look, dude, we got a couple of burners here. Like, you ain't going to be able to just dump it off to Chase Edmonds here. You are going to have to take shots, and that's what they did. So, I was encouraged by that. He still is Teddy Bridgewater, and he threw the bad pick, and whether that was the wrong route or whether he just completely missed Gesicki, we'll see. It bummed me out because there's a person at this table with two thumbs that had the Dolphins plus 3.5, and it's this guy. Yeah. And so I was looking good. I felt like while Tua was still in the game.
I will say, just quickly, producer Brian Rubin, he asked me this morning if Skylar Thompson was a dark horse bet for Offensive Rookie of the Year. No, Skylar was Bryan Cranston's wife on Breaking Bad, not an Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate.
Fine, well done. Skylar White, by the way, officially the worst character in TV history.
That's correct.
That you're supposed to root for.
That's
the caveat.
That's the key.
Because there are guys when you think about like Game of Thrones, when you think about like Ramses Bolton, like you hate Ramses Bolton, but you're supposed to hate Ramses Bolton. He's a bad guy. And that's not a spoiler, by the way.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you any of the things that Ramses does, but he's a bad guy.
On this show.
You can't, right? Fair. But but of all characters you're supposed to root for and like, Walter White's wife in Breaking Bad, one of the top 5 television series of all time, is my argument for the worst character in TV history that you were supposed to like.
Okay, that's fair. We had a whole thing off air about that, but I think that I don't know. I think that the fact that she's unlikable makes Walter White more likable, which is part of the game. But anyway,
I wonder if Vince McGilligan has been asked about that. I haven't done the deep dive into Breaking Bad. I watched the show and it's brilliant and it deserves every award and accolade that it got. But that's an interesting take on it. They wrote that character so. Anyway, all right. We're off the rails.
Steer us back onto the highway here.
Connor,
we covered
please.
the Dolphins wide receivers. Big night for Tyreek Hill. 6 of those 10 catches were for first downs. 3 of them for over 15 yards. Jalen Waddle, not the same.
Tough game. Not worried about it though. I mean, he's so explosive. He's a talented player. We've seen him. Again, this was a short week on the road, and they lose their starting quarterback in an awful fashion. And so I don't think there's much you can take away from this game I think if there's one other thing, Connor, that I would take away from this game, it's just that it feels like we have a little bit more of a pecking order now with the running backs here. Mostert, career highs in offensive snaps and routes run. He ran 26 routes in this game. He outcarried Chase Edmonds 15-5. He outsnapped him 46-18.
It's not even close, that number.
And now, right. I mean, Edmonds gets the touchdown. He could have actually had 2 because he had the bad drop early on. But to me, it feels like at least there's a floor with Edmonds, whereas there's a floor with Mostert. At least there's a floor with Mostert, whereas with Edmonds, you're hoping for those scores. And now he's got 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, so okay. But it feels like, and maybe he gets a little bit more value if Teddy Bridgewater winds up becoming the starting quarterback for the Dolphins for any period of time here. But for me, I feel like Raheem Mostert, based on the usage, got himself into flex play territory now, whereas Edmonds is more shaky.
Raheem the dream.
The transition here.
Every time this guy's healthy, he's an elite talent at running back. All he does is average 5 yards per carry. Like, he's just a monster.
Raheem
and also
must start.
Yes, he didn't get the touchdown, and it kind of got vultured from him a little bit, even though it was through the air. But he did get 2 goal line carries at the end, just didn't get it in. He's definitely the guy you want in Miami going forward.
Yeah, and the familiarity with Mike McDaniel, once again, we say it every week. Mike McDaniel's job for a long time in San Francisco was orchestrating the run game. And back then, he was leaning on Mostert. Unfortunately, injuries didn't go his way. Now they seem to be going on the right track. Let's move over to the Bengals. Joe Burrow, solid fantasy night, the 2 touchdowns. It was a slow start for Joe Burrow, but obviously got back on track here. Now back-to-back 20-plus fantasy point games after going under 20 the first two. Are you feeling a little better about Burrow after that tough 2-week stretch?
Yeah, sure. I think you have to be. We knew the talent here, and anytime you get a chance to throw to guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, you feel good about this. 31 pass attempts in what was a pretty low-scoring, slow-paced game. But this is what Joe Burrow is. He's not going to run a ton, and generally speaking, but they are going to throw it a bunch, especially when you think about how much the run game is struggling here. I mean, they did everything possible to make Joe Mixon work in this game. They gave him 28 touches in this game, massive volume for Joe Mixon, and he pays off for you. He pays off for you because he gets in the end zone despite, he should have had multiple. I mean, he like 6 or 7 goal line carries in this one, and he only converted the one early in the game. But 2.5 yards per rush so far, and they weren't using him. He got 4 targets in the passing game, but it was well snuffed out. We liked, and by we, I really mean me, but I'm trying to include you in my misery. I liked the over on his receiving yards, which was 21.5, and that was a bet that I gave out yesterday. He had hit that 2 of the last 3, and Dolphins have struggled in receiving yards allowed to opposing running backs, but not in this one. Just 4 receptions, 13 yards. The under hits, which is not what I bet, so apologies out there for that one. We will do better this weekend on that one. But, but to me, the struggles of the run game, favor Joe Burrow's passing volume, which he continues to be a low-end QB1.
Why is this team running the ball 30 times last night for
Zach
67
Taylor.
yards?
Yeah.
I'm completely out on Zach Taylor in terms of optimizing that passing and that offense. I mean, they were successful throwing it through the air. Burrow, despite getting less pass attempts than he really should have, still able to put up some good numbers. But yeah, I would be very concerned because I think deep down in his heart, Zach Taylor, he wants to run the ball for 3 yards a carry and punt on 4th and 1 or kick field goals. He's a very conservative coach. I think that's going to limit the absolute top-end ceiling of Burrow and Chase and Higgins, who are all going to be fine because they're superstar talents, but they're just not going to see the volume they should.
I didn't hear anything you said. You're kind of way down there, but you made a lot of noises.
Sounds good.
I read your mouth, and I agree with sort of what I was being able to lip read from way down there on that. Higgins and Chase are fine. Chase ended up hitting the over on those receiving yards at the very end. He was under on the receptions in terms of that. But yes, Higgins and Chase are fine. It is a 1A situation with it. Both those guys are wide receiver ones.
Yeah, with that, I mean, I gave out under 73.5 yards for Jamar Chase on the show last night. He had 8 yards at the half going into the last drive. There's 2.5 minutes left, and they're running out the clock, and he's got 45 yards. And then Zach Taylor, the most conservative coach in football, throws a go route down the left sideline for a 35-yard bomb. So there is a little bit of, I've got a thing with Zach Taylor now.
Yeah. Bad beats for the boys here. Anyway, but that's to me, Connor, what my takeaway and Jay's takeaway is.
Yeah, and if you're hoping for this run game to get going, I think the one number that stood out to me, guys, PFF has Mixon averaging less than a yard before contact. Basically, when he gets the ball, he's hit. So that speaks more about the situation around him right now than Joe Mixon himself, while I don't really trust this to get that much better for the run game.
They tried to improve the offensive line in the offseason, and through 4 games, it doesn't appear that they have. They've spent a lot more money, but I don't know that they've improved in terms of the run game. It's like us here. Like this table is expensive. It's a lot more expensive.
Yeah, this is Lyle Collins.
Jay, what's the table jokes
you know what? That's the new name for this table. It's Lyle Collins.
Yeah, Lyle
We're
Collins.
sitting here, Lyle. Yeah.
It doesn't move.
It does.
Left
Look
to
how
right.
massive it is.
Yes.
Lyle.
By the way, you could actually fit an Applebee's in this table. Like we should have like a pop-up Applebee's, like literally in this table.
A buffet.
Yeah, a buffet.
With a drink dispenser. All right,
let's
let's get into some Roto World headlines, then we'll get back to the table jokes once again. We'll take those breaks. Fellas, let's start with the Saints, who have just had a plethora of injury problems that seems like it's all coming to a head right now. Jameis Winston is doubtful with the back injury. Michael Thomas is officially out for Week 4. Putting those two guys away, what does this mean for Chris Olave playing now with Andy Dalton taking all the first-team reps this week?
It's a glass half full, glass half empty kind of thing here, right? So on the positives here, we don't expect Michael Thomas to play. Dennis Allen came out and already announced that he was not going to play.
Yeah, he's out.
He's officially been ruled out. So we expect a higher target share for Chris Olave. Having said that, those targets are coming from Andy Dalton, who is, dump off Dalton, right? He is not going to chuck it deep the way that Jameis has. As we've talked about, through the first 3 games, it's been full-on Jameis, the full Jameis experience, and that's been beneficial to Chris Olave, who leads the NFL in total air yards. He's the second most air yards per target among wide receivers. I don't think he's going – Dalton isn't as good as Winston, and he certainly isn't as aggressive either. As we see some practice throws here he is.
Letting it rip.
Oh, wow.
Letting it rip like a
Red
5-yard
rifle.
out
Right.
in a red jersey with no pressure. He still looks slow. But look, this is like
It's London. Is that a
yeah,
soccer
this is
player?
in London. Like they're on the pitch. They're on the pitch in London.
About to
and
play a match.
Dalton literally looks slow. Anyway. The fact is I think that if we had Winston and no Michael Thomas, we would be all in on him as maybe as a top 12, 15 play. To me, I think he's more of a top 30 play. I think Olave is still somewhere in that 20 to 30 range. Upside because of more targets with no Thomas, but downside because I think he's got a quarterback downgrade. Ultimately, my guess is that if you've been starting Chris Olave, I'm still starting him, but I think there's less of a floor there with Olave than there's less floor and less upside than there was with Jameis Winston.
I think it's just a bummer for Jameis Winston as well, because he was, like we talked about yesterday, 2019, he was the 3rd ranked quarterback in fantasy. And the worry was that it was going to be like last year, where they go into the season going half Jameis. You never want to go half Jameis. You always want to go full Jameis. And Chris Olave was reaping those benefits. And now it's just a new ball game, but Alvin Kamara should benefit for sure.
It's a big Alvin Kamara game, I believe, in this one, again, with dump-off Dalton. And the Vikings, by the way, Kamara made my love list this week. We talked about him yesterday on the show as well. I think this is Alvin Kamara's week.
All right. One thing for you, Jay. Olave's been averaging over 19 yards, average depth of target. Yeah. We know that's coming down now. How does that impact his Rookie of the Year chase? Because he's kind of been in the thick of it.
Yeah, he wants Jameis Winston back. There are too many good receivers. Drake London, who's basically the joint favorite with Olave. Your man, Garrett Wilson. Another of your guys I want to talk about later in the show, Breece Hall.
Absolutely.
He's very live for that as well. And yeah, he needs that depth. He needs Jameis airing it out. Otherwise, he's just another guy in the pack, the very talented pack.
All right.
But one thing we want to talk about here is we mentioned, if I'm in a deeper league and I need quarterbacks and maybe Winston gets waived because of this, I do think, again, so he's not playing this game against the Vikings on Sunday morning in London, sorry. But then think about this. Home to Seattle, home to Cincinnati, at Arizona, home to Las Vegas, home to Baltimore. Every single one of those teams you can throw on, right? And he's playing at home in 4 of the next 5. So I do think Jameis Winston, assuming he comes back from this, is a very viable streamer here. Week 10, he's at Pittsburgh. The Steelers haven't been able – they made Jacoby Brissett look useful last week. It's not until weeks 11 and 12 when he plays the Rams at home and at San Francisco, week 13 at Tampa Bay. It gets a little bit tough there starting in week 11, and then they have the bye in week 14. But I think he's going to be useful here for the middle of the season.
Incredible schedule, and also if this injury lingers, I think Andy Dalton will be streamable as well as a quarterback potentially, just given that there's still Olave, Thomas will come back, Landry, Alvin Kamara. He should be useful enough.
I'm sorry. It's the table I didn't. You didn't. It sounded like you said Andy Dalton will be useful. I'm sorry. We got to get a shorter table so I can hear you correctly. I know you didn't.
He didn't actually.
Is that Matthew Berry? Is that the fantasy football guy? Yeah, there you go.
Jay, how are you?
The biggest
mate.
injury of the week, guys, has to be Amon-Ra St. Brown being out.
He's actually right, by
it's
the way.
official.
And I'm just making fun, but
okay.
deep 2 quarterback leagues. Andy Dalton can be useful.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Yep.
He's fine.
Headline: Matthew Berry, fire up red rifle in all fantasy formats.
I did not say that. I did not say that.
Every single format. At Matthew Berry, it is on Twitter right now. Amon-Ra St. Brown with the ankle is officially out for week 4. Brutal if you have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been a beast. But more importantly for this week now, we've kind of been on the Jared Goff streamer train here a little bit. I believe he is on the love list for you recently. How does this impact Goff? This is his guy. This is his volume guy.
It definitely does not help Jared Goff as well. So I'm trying to find here we go. Okay, so I had them text me some stats. No. But listen, last week, after Amon-Ra St. Brown left the game, he got his ankle taped up, he came back out, but he's mostly used as a decoy. After he left, Josh Reynolds, 8 targets, 4 for 73. DJ Shark just 1 for 6 on 4 targets. TJ Hawkinson 2 for 13 on 3 targets. So if you are looking for a replacement wide receiver, also kind of a cheap play in DFS, I do think Josh Reynolds is useful this week against the Seattle Seahawks. Also remember, the Seahawks really struggle with a linebacker play. You can attack them with your tight ends. I think it's a big TJ Hawkinson week. Of course, no DeAndre Swift here, but certainly you don't love this. 43% of Jared Goff's touchdown passes so far this year have gone to our sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think this is more. I think it's Reynolds, it's Hawkinson. Seahawks have allowed the 3rd most yards to opposing tight ends. That's my concern.
Yeah, I've always liked Josh Reynolds. Always thought he's solid, but I think him being the #1 wide receiver, it's kind of like.
I did. Former Texas A&M Aggie Josh Reynolds. Let's go, King of Ags.
Obviously, he's not very well cast as being the #1 guy. It's like having Aaron Paul leading an action movie for you. Which I guess happened with Need for Speed. Yeah, I like Aaron Paul a lot. It's just he's not Justin Jefferson or whatever.
I understand.
He's a slightly better version of Josh Reynolds. But look, the market is certainly.
Cut to Aaron Paul being like, why am I getting trapped?
This is the worst stray of all time.
I'm just saying, there's guys like Tom Cruise leading action movies, and there's Aaron Paul leading action movies.
What do you have
Tom
against
Cruise
Jesse Pinkman? I don't understand. All right, fine.
But look, this Detroit offense has been elite. 7th by DVOA in offense, and Amon-Ra St. Brown has been arguably the biggest part of that. Yeah. And now the market certainly respects Amon-Ra St. Brown because the line has dropped from Detroit -6 to now Detroit -4 against Seattle. So
that's a big switch for a wide receiver. Do you think is it St. Brown or is it St. Brown and Swift?
St. Brown and Swift, and I think 6 is probably just a little bit too big as an opener anyway. So it probably should have been 5.5, and then Amon-Ra and Swift are worth like 1.5 points to the line combined. So that's in there, and if you don't think that's right, then go bet the Lions -4.
At BetMGM, please. That's what we do.
BetMGM.
At BetMGM. Real quickly, I'll just say this: that I feel like Jared Goff is still like a viable streamer this week. Still playing against Seattle. Still at home against Seattle. Seattle's like a bottom 12 pass defense so far this year. And they haven't. Seattle's a bottom 12 pass defense, and they played like Russell Wilson. You know what I mean? Like, and like Garoppolo. Anyway, so I think Jared Goff will still be fine, but certainly lower expectations.
I feel bad about the Aaron Paul comment. I want to take that back. He's a lot better than Josh Reynolds. I just don't want that on my record that I'm anti-Aaron Paul.
It's clipped out. He's tagged in it.
Done.
It's tough for you, Jay. All right, guys, time for the most consistent part of the week besides Barry saying he's a company man. Christian McCaffrey, how much did he or did he not practice this week? He returned to practice today with the quad injury after not practicing Wednesday and Thursday. If you drafted him, Barry, this is just what you have to deal with, right?
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, you're happy that he is back at practice. He's officially questionable. My expectation here is that he play. Matt Rule said, quote, he is, quote, very hopeful about his availability. My expectation here is, at least as we sit here today, is that he plays and that he plays well. Like, they're at home to Arizona. The Cardinals haven't been able to stop anyone. The volume has been there for Christian McCaffrey. Now, has he had the monster games that we had hoped? Not yet, but for the most part, he's been playing. He's getting the volume, and on an offense where not much is going right, McCaffrey's been fine. There are worse first-round picks than Christian McCaffrey this year.
Yeah, no concerns about McCaffrey until we see it on the field be concerning, because he's looked exactly as you would hope so far.
All right, we're going to take a break, but when we return, it
Jay,
is
go
Flex
long.
Friday.
Jay, go long.
Sit and start Flex players when we're back.
Oh, it's definitely a rivalry game. Every time I play Washington, they're gonna bring it. You always have a tough defense. Rooted around that D line. We built ourselves off the O line. They built themselves on a D line, and so it's always gonna be a good matchup.
It is Flex Friday. We have plenty of sit, start Flex players to go through. And
you don't actually need muscles to flex, right?
No.
You can just, this is what I'm doing. I have huge muscles. Just the shirt's loose. Trust me.
Next time you put a little padding in there.
I'll never forget. One time, I used to work with Merrill Hodge, former NFL running back. Oh, yeah. Merrill's awesome, and Merrill at ESPN used to have these he always had the tightest shirts, and he had the big tie. He had the knot in the tie, and he always looked great. Merrill looked great. And I remember one time, like this is like my first week or so at ESPN or something like that. Maybe I've been there a month, and I'm like, Merrill, man, like, and my shirt's always baggy and everything like that. I'm like, Merrill, how do you get your shirt so tight? You always look so good on air. How do you get your shirt so tight like that? And he just looks at me, he's like, do a couple bench presses, son. Do a couple bench presses. And he walks off. And I'm just like, all right, fair enough.
Fair enough.
Exactly. Fair enough. You're a former NFL running back, and I'm not. I got it. Understood. And I was just like, all right, baggy shirts for me here on out.
Yeah, you passed on the bench presses.
I'll never forget that. But for the record, by the way, I love Merrill Hodge. Like, the sweetest guy. Like, he's a good friend. Like, he's awesome. But anyway.
And endless tips for Flex Friday, which is also what we need you for right now. So let's start your Commanders at Dallas this week. We're starting with Dallas. This backfield, we talk about it nonstop. Ezekiel, Elliott, obviously not a flex player, a higher upside than that. But with him and Tony Pollard, what are your expectations right now? As Pollard has not been used in the pass game as much as we had hoped preseason.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my concern here is with Pollard, 2 or fewer targets in 2 of the 3 games, right? Ezekiel Elliott actually ran twice as many routes in week 3. He's lined up wider in the slot for only 20 plays so far this season, and candidly, I think they're going to be up in this game. Cowboys are significant favorites in this game. My Commanders can't stop anyone. They're brutal. And so game script doesn't look like, if there was a week for Pollard to get involved in the passing game, doesn't feel like this is it, especially given the fact that there's a chance that we get Michael Gallup back, and we hope Dalton Schultz is back as well. So for me, I have him as running back 28, Pollard. Like, I think he's a low-end flex, and I think that both with him and Zeke, they're both touchdown-dependent flexes. And I would prefer Ezekiel Elliott in this one. He comes in as running back 16 for me, like more of a touchdown-dependent RB2, because we feel like the volume here with Ezekiel Elliott, we expect that, again, in positive game script, because Zeke is getting work. He's had at least 16 touches each of the last 2 weeks, right? I mean, he's also not being involved in the passing game, but, like, if they get in close, who do you expect to score the touchdown? It's Ezekiel Elliott. And they should be up in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it at the end there with Zeke and his lack of involvement in the passing game. Like, that's the surprising thing, is that he had 77 receptions in 2018. This year he's got 3 for -5 yards. Yeah. That's less than 0.
Wow.
That's bad. Brett Easton Ellison, Ezekiel Elliott, less than 0.
Less than 0. Well
so
done.
I think that both of these running backs are just kind of capped by their situation at the moment, and yet they're both flex guys, and you just kind of hope that you guess right and one of them gets in the end zone or goes off.
And like I said, I prefer Ezekiel Elliott by a significant margin. Again, running back 16, Pollard I have as 28. I think Zeke is sort of settled in as kind of more of a touchdown-dependent RB2, but the volume is there, and I think there's a pretty good chance he gets into the end zone against my pathetic Washington Commanders.
Well, staying right with those.
Washington Commanders defense. My pathetic Washington Commanders defense.
So let's talk about the offense then. Yeah. Antonio Gibson, who you have closely ranked to Zeke, and of course Terry McLaurin, who it's kind of been an odd season for him so far in terms of volume. Gibson and McLaurin, are they both flex worthy? I would assume yes, but how high end can they be?
I have Gibson at 27, and he makes me nervous, right?
Okay.
Every week since week 1, his touches and targets have declined. He's been under 60 rushing yards in all 3 games this season, and you saw last week when they were getting blown up by Philadelphia, J.D. McKissick actually, was the more productive running back. He was on the field more. They were using more in the passing game, and I think that's what happens here. Again, you just sort of have to. How do you think this game plays out here? Washington, they're underdogs in this game. More than a field goal underdogs in this game, and so. Gibson makes me nervous. I think he is a low-floor flex. I have him at running back 27. I'm more optimistic about Terry McLaurin. Again, we expect him to be passing a ton. He's had 100% route participation among all wide receivers, 75 yards or a touchdown in all 3 games so far this season. They're going to be throwing a lot. Yes, he'll see some Trayvon Diggs, but as we've talked about with Diggs is both really good and also takes a lot of chances, right? And so that's all you need is one, is like he tries to jump a route a little bit too early, and they catch him flat-footed. McLaurin has played well against Dallas over his career when he's had worse quarterback play and less target competition, but also more defensive attention. So given given Curtis Samuel, given John Dotson, I think he'll find himself in single coverage some this game, and they'll take advantage of that. McLaurin's wide receiver 24 for me. Generally, if you've been starting him so far this week, I'm starting him again.
Yeah, I mean, Carson Wentz was sacked 9 times against the Eagles, so good news.
Only 9?
Micah Parsons is in town. He's not very good, so I'm sure Carson Wentz will be fine there. But look, the one thing about Dallas last year is that they were really vulnerable to deep passes, largely because of trick-or-treat Trayvon Diggs. But this year they've kind of fixed that up a little bit. And it's only a 3-game sample, so we'll see what happens there. But I do think you can run on the Cowboys. The Bucs ran on them effectively. Saquon, who is a different kind of player to Antonio Gibson, clearly, but still the Giants ran effectively. So I would look at Antonio Gibson as maybe the guy over McLaurin. But yeah, I wouldn't be too optimistic about the Commanders.
I agree. You can absolutely run on Dallas. They're 23rd against the run over the last 3 weeks. My concern is like, do they have to abandon the run?
Yep.
Because overall it's a really good defense. To your point, Carson Wentz has been a turnover machine so far this year, even in the good games. Like even in the game when they won against Jacksonville, he still threw 2 awful interceptions as well. And so I'm just worried, right? Again, and a lot of those 9 sacks from last week were on Carson Wentz.
Yep.
And so I think they're going to tee off on him, and my fear is that maybe there's an easy defensive touchdown. I like the Cowboys defense quite a bit this week, and that they bail on establishing the run, as it were, as you just saw some production there from Terry McLaurin on your screen. Terry McScorin, as I like to call him. But fair enough. I think what you're saying is you think Gibson is a viable flex. I agree with you that he's a viable flex, but I also think there's less of a floor there than most starting running backs, because they could easily abandon the run pretty quickly and just go all passing with McKissick.
Yeah, I just think Cooper Rush probably not going to run away with the game into a 3-touchdown lead or anything like that. So hopefully it is close enough that they can still run the ball, but it could fall out completely. And also, Brian Robinson might be back pretty soon, so Antonio Gibson wants to play pretty well this week.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, battle of the MVP candidates. The Bills 3-point favorites going to Baltimore. Let's start right there with the Bills. Motor Singletary, you have him as RB24 going into Week 4. How do you like him as a flex play this week?
I like him a lot. I have Singletary pretty high this week, right? I'm at 24, and so my take here. My take is that last week we saw him get used in the passing game in a significant way. Career highs in targets and receptions last week, played on nearly 75% of the snaps. And so in close games, in games in which they need to, as you see it here on your screen, last week, 9 rushing attempts, 13 rushing yards, okay, whatever. But 9 receptions and 78 receiving yards. He also scores the touchdown through the air. 24.1 fantasy points against the Dolphins. That was a game in which, now, the Bills threw it 60 times in that game. Right, so we don't expect that kind of volume, but the fact is that was the first game where the Bills were tested and where they had to try to move the ball, and so Devin Singletary is a big part of the passing game. Ravens allow 5 yards per carry to opposing running backs. They've given up the 3rd most receptions to opposing running backs so far this year. We expect the Ravens to be in this game. This one to be a close one, especially when you consider how beat up the Bills' secondary is. So I think the Ravens are able to move the ball here, and so they're going to have to throw, especially, by the way, we got news just before the show that Gabe Davis re-injured the ankle. He is questionable for this game. We don't know if he's going to be available or not, but if Gabe Davis is not out there or at less than 100%, it gives even more credence to the idea that Singletary used more in the passing attack.
Yeah, I think that everything points to a big Devin Singletary game. I think that the Ravens, they give up an incredible amount of receptions to running backs, and also
their
they have
linebackers
the efficiency.
Are vulnerable. Yeah.
Very vulnerable. And also the total for this game is 51, which is the highest of the week. So there's going to be a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns to be found.
Yep.
All right, staying with the Bills here, and we talked about Gabe Davis already. That's just up in the air. But Dawson Knox, it's been a disappointing year for those that drafted Dawson Knox. Right now, you have him as tight end 14. At what point is he borderline just not trustworthy as a playable tight end option?
It's now.
We're here, right?
We're here. Yeah. We're here. You are here.
Sunk cost. Sunk cost.
Sunk cost. The big maps, like where you're in like a big space and you're looking at a map, like you are here. We need that for this table, by the way, just so you can find yourself in this table. Just like if we could get that for Monday, just a big map of the table and like little red dots, so we each know where we are in respect to each other. But we're there with Dawson Knox as well in terms of like basically a touchdown-dependent tight end too. He's my tight end 14 for the week. He's had 11 targets in 3 games. Like 11 targets is nice for one game, but 11 targets over 3 games, it's not ideal. He's been held to under 45 yards in every single game, and it's not like the Bills' offense has struggled. They've been putting up points left and right. I mean, again, think about this. They threw it 60 times last week. And yet Dawson Knox was tight end 22 in week 3. And so he's touchdown dependent. That's what you're hoping for. He's not even a top 22 tight end this year on a points per game basis. He is nothing. He is touchdown dependent. Now, again, if you're in that range, better hit. You'd rather the tight end that's playing for Josh Allen, a team that we think is going to score a lot of points in a game, to Jay's point, that has a very high over/under. But that's what he is. He's a touchdown dependent tight end too that can easily get you 4.5 points.
9 games in a row, he hasn't topped 5 targets. There's just no ceiling there. It's incredible that Josh Allen has a chance to throw for near 6,000 yards this year, and Dawson Knox still isn't going to be viable. He's just in that dead zone with Albert O and Cole Kmet and these guys who you just don't really want any part of unless you have to.
Yeah, it seems like they paid him because they love his blocking and there's receiving upside that they don't need to rely on.
Yeah, listen, he had a great year last year, but it was all very touchdown influenced, right? And so I wouldn't put him in the category of Cole Kmet. Because Dawson Knox has caught a pass this year, right?
Cole Kmet got a couple last week.
It's a unique category.
He's building. Two catches. I want to say 20 yards.
One's on the field with Josh Allen, one's on the field with Justin Fields. Sure. But anyway, we both agree here is that starting Dawson Knox this week is not for the faint of heart. That's what you're hoping for a touchdown.
I think the Ravens side of this game is much more interesting because their offense is Lamar Jackson, and then everything else is this mystery. So when you look at Rashod Bateman, who's kind of been absent for 2 of the 3 games in terms of targets, and then J.K. Dobbins, who's still working his way back, do you even play these guys at this point, or you're just constantly waiting and seeing with the Baltimore offense?
I'm playing Rashod Bateman. Again, he's lower for me, right, than I think I would like. But again, high over-under in this game. We expect a lot of points to be scored. To your point about Lamar Jackson, you think about that Bills secondary, right? Micah Hyde not going to play in this one, right? Tre'Davious White still on the physically unable to perform list. It's a secondary that's playing above expectations, but it is still beat
rookies
up. And so, this is a guy in Rashod Bateman who leads the NFL in yards per reception. He's got a 17.5 average depth of target. They're chucking it deep. So Bateman's one of those guys that all he needs is one play. In the game with a over-under, you said it's 51.5 now. It's up to 51.5. Yeah, I'm willing to take a chance on Bateman as a wide receiver 3.
Jay, do you think this lives up to shootout expectations?
I think it will. I just think Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they're just unsolvable. They're both defense agnostic guys. It doesn't matter the opposing defense because they're just too good. I do think with Rashod Bateman, there's a little bit of a concern. He's only got 8 catches on the season. He is boom or bust, and he's 100%. Relied on 75-yard house call against the Dolphins, the 55-yard bomb against the Jets.
Yeah, big plays. Two big plays.
I mean, he makes those plays. That's a part of the Rashod Bateman experience, but at the same time, it would be nice if he could, have more than 8 catches in 3 games.
There's no question about it. There is not a floor. I mean, this is why we're talking about him on Flex Friday. You guys don't need us to sit here and be like, start Josh Allen. Who I love this week is Lamar Jackson. Mark Andrews should be in your lineup. You don't need us doing that. So we're taking on the tough questions.
We're
taking on
here.
a tough table and a tough questions. That's what we're doing right here. That's right. A lot of you know what? It'd be easy. It'd be easy to be at a comfortable table and just talk about the quarterbacks and the obvious stars, but not us at the happy hour. No. That's why we drink heavily, because we are going to make the tough calls, right? We're all right, fine. Drink up and let's go. Bottoms up, baby. That's right.
All right. Tough calls. Chargers at Texans.
Yeah,
plenty of tough calls in this game. Flex Friday. This is the Flex Friday game.
So again, Bateman, to your point, it depends on I'll just talk philosophy for 1 second before we move on. I just want to say that I feel like that it depends when you're getting your flex, what do you need? Right? Are you down big? Did you face T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow from Thursday night? Are you down big? You face Kamara as well, and you're and he has a big game Sunday morning, and you're I got to swing for the fences. Bateman's more of a play, but if you have T. Higgins and you're up big or something like that, you started Higgins and you played against a guy who has Tua, and hit Tua and Waddle, and you're I'm feeling pretty good. I want more of a floor play at my flex. Maybe you pivot somewhere else. So
I love when Matthew talks philosophy, goes into Friedrich Berry mode. Plato Berry.
1,000%, right? I'm gonna be naked and sitting here on the chair next segment.
Well, you can spread out on the table.
The philosopher. What's that? You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. The name escapes me, but I think everyone can visualize it right now.
What is it? So research will get on that. I didn't pay attention to that class, but I'm merely saying that I think that your lineup decisions, especially at the flex spot, depend a lot on your matchup, what has happened prior to you making that choice. So in this game, we'll have 2 games. We'll have the Thursday game and the Sunday morning game. So anyway.
All right, what everybody's been waiting for, Chargers at Texans. Justin Herbert fully cleared now, which is a great sign for the Chargers offense. But I think some of the big questions start with Houston. Dameon Pierce coming in as RB25 for you for the summer. Obvious flex upside here, but is it touchdown dependent with Pierce for you?
I don't think so. I mean, again, like he's just getting so much volume, right? There's been 38 running back carries for the Houston Texans over the last 2 weeks, and he's seen 35 of them. The concern here, if there is one concern, that is that they could get down big to the Chargers. They haven't really been tested by a good offense yet, the Texans defense, right? I mean, they played like, they played the Colts, and they played like the Broncos and
the Bears
and the Bears, right? So they haven't been tested. So if they're down big, Pierce, who has not had any passing game involvement so far this year, could get phased out. So much as like we talked about with Antonio Gibson earlier in the show, the concern here is, does Dameon Pierce, again, I think he's a viable flex, but there is less of a floor here than you might expect for a starting running back.
Yeah, he's a bit of a conundrum because he's getting the volume, and that's exactly what you want. And he's really good, but at the same time, just game script is just going to kill him week after week. I mean, last year the Texans had 8 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. They ran for 3.4 yards per carry. They're averaging 83 yards a game. Like there's just nothing there. And the Chargers are now 6-point favorites.
All right, looking over on the Chargers side, Mike Williams has 15 yards or less in 2 of the 3 games this year. Week 1 was the dud. Week 2 was the bounce back. Week 3, the Mike Williams roller coaster. How do you play it? Because you drafted him to play him.
You just got to start him.
Yeah.
Mike Williams, you cannot guess, this is a Mike Williams week, this isn't.
No,
with Mike Williams, it's just
insane.
I'm in or I'm out. And so I think if you've drafted him, I think you need to be in. This should be a good game against the Texans. I'm in.
Yeah, I think the one concern about the Chargers overall now is that this offensive line, which is looking much improved, now it's back to the Phil Rivers days.
Decimated again.
Rashawn Slater, yeah.
He's done. He's one of the best offensive linemen in the league. The Storm Norton show, which apparently isn't coming, it's not being renewed for season 2 because he's not even going to play. They've benched Storm Norton. They've benched the guy behind Rashawn Slater because he was so bad. So that is just one concern. And then obviously Herbert's ribs too, but you have to play Mike Williams.
But worth noting, no Jalen Guyton in this game.
Yep.
We don't expect Keenan Allen to play, so maybe more of a narrow target tree for the pass catchers like Mike Williams, like Josh Palmer, like Gerald Everett.
Yeah, without Keenan Allen, do you go back to Josh Palmer again?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. When Keenan Allen's out, you start Josh Palmer, especially in a favorable matchup. No injury designation for Justin Herbert. We know he's going to be in the flak jacket. We know he's going to be in pain. But the fact is, he's not even listed as probable or questionable. No injury designation for Herbert, who has practiced all week. Hopefully, he'll be a little bit better against the Texans.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we're back, what we're watching for in Week 4. Plenty of Jets, Bucks, Chiefs, and the Niners.
I'm still in on Gerald Everett, too, by the way. Start him.
Always.
Be sure to check out our new Sunday show, Fantasy Football Pregame, at 11 a.m. live on Peacock. It's a one-stop shop for your NFL fantasy and betting needs. Get your sit-star questions answered using the hashtag FFPregame.
Jay Croucher and I went 8-4 on Prop-A-Shot.
Not bad.
On Prop-A-Shot last week. I'm just saying, we're making people money. Stealing that money. Not stealing, earning that money from BetMGM. That's literally Jay Croucher and I's entire goal this year, is to get as much of BetMGM's money in our pockets and our viewers' pockets. And then when we have that profit, we will buy a proper table. That's what we're doing. I've thought about starting a GoFundraiser, but no, we're gonna this. I'm gonna use BetMGM money to buy this show a proper table.
All right. They might recast you guys for the remake of The Town at this point with how you're doing.
The Town. One of the most underrated films of the past 15 years. A really solid film. Very rewatchable as well.
Very rewatchable.
I got nothing bad to say about The Town.
Right, well,
I'm not going to spoil it because it came out this century.
Yeah, there you go.
So everyone can watch Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, not needing to know about what happened to Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner and co.
Okay. By the way, very quickly, NBCSportsEdge.com tweeting out Todd Bowles calling Chris Godwin and Julio Jones game time decisions. So we will check that out. We will see what happens there. Sunday night game right here on NBC and Peacock, right?
That's right. All right, we are going to get to the Bucs in just a moment, but before we do, we are starting with the Jets. I don't think that's just because I'm here, but we are starting with the Jets.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson.
Why talk about Tom Brady when we talk about Zach Wilson?
That's exactly right. Zach Wilson is back, and his offensive coordinator did talk about him this week. Seems pretty excited by his return.
It's cool. It's just cool for him, whether it's Zach or anyone that's missed time because of injury. I mean, you just want to see him on the grass, and so he gets to be out there. He put in a lot of work to put himself in this position to get back. I don't think anyone really knew after the injury, particularly right when it happened, what was going to happen, and how long he was going to be out. So to get him back and going into week 4, and I know he feels 100% healthy, and he's going to go play his game.
LaFleur took your hat over the face style from week 1. He must be watching the happy hour.
Yeah,
here.
Probably. I like it. I like it a lot, and I think we're all excited. Listen, Zach Wilson on the grass, so much better than like Zach Wilson in your mom's kitchen, right? I mean, let's be clear, right? It's a better place for Zach Wilson to be. Keep on the field.
For the sake of America.
Yeah, exactly. For the sake of 100%.
Moms across America.
Moms across America.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, with Wilson's return, we're looking at both Breece Hall and Michael Carter. The Steelers' defense, obviously, especially without T.J. Watt, pretty vulnerable group. My take is the Jets are going to take the ball out of Wilson's hands in this return. I think it's going to be a slow ramp up. When you hear something like that, what is your take on Hall and Carter? We're both factored in this offense.
Yeah, I like Breece Hall. I mean, I think that I didn't love his ADP preseason, but I certainly now, if you wound up with him, I mean, Breece Hall was a top 13 fantasy running back last week, and Michael Carter was running back 50, right? He's averaging 5.3 yards per carry. He's got a 14% target share in this game. He's had a 60 or more scrimmage yards in every game he's played so far this season. He's playing a lot more snaps than Michael Carter is. Season high 51% snap rate over Michael Carter here. So Steelers, bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of most receptions and yards per reception allowed to opposing running backs. Apologies. So I do think Breece Hall is viable this week. Made the love list. Others receiving votes this week.
Connor, plus 1,400. Breece Hall, Offensive Rookie of the Year. You like that? You're a Jets guy.
I do like it. I mean, they're obviously starting to shift more towards him. Flacco missed him on a wheel route should-be touchdown last week. So these numbers can look a lot different if you factor in a 30-yard touchdown. He was wide open. So I think the most important thing is the Jets are going to, 1, run the ball with Zach Wilson a ton, and 2, start to shift those runs to Breece. And the Rookie of the Year field is just so wide open. We talked about Olave starting to go down a little bit. Obviously, Garrett Wilson is on this team, but
we'll see. What will be really interesting here is what happens with Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis. Elijah Moore was not good last year when Wilson was under center.
Absolutely.
But again, different offense, second year. I don't know. For me, I just think this is one of those wait and see. Ideally, you're not starting any of the – one of them will have a decent game here because it's not a bad matchup against Pittsburgh. But whether – we just don't know. We need to see. So anyway,
all right.
I just hopefully it's a wait and see approach with the Jets wide receivers.
All right, we teased it at the top. The Bucs offense, Mike Evans is back. Julio Jones and Chris Godwin, nobody knows at this moment. Both questionable going into this game. Tom Brady right now, really, really slow, uncharacteristic start for Brady. With Evans back, is he going to be on track?
We certainly hope so. I mean, listen, I'm as a borderline top 10 play here. We expect a lot of fireworks in this game. Right, this should be 2 pretty good offenses in the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. Last I saw, over/under was 45.
45.5.
45. Yep. It's up. It ticked up a little bit to 45.5. So, you know what? I have Brady as QB 10 so far this week. It's worth noting Kansas City has allowed 7 passing touchdowns this season. That's second most in the NFL. And it's not like they did face Herbert, but they also faced Matt Ryan, last week. So I think this is a get-right game for Tom Brady, especially if he gets Godwin or Julio Jones back. We know he does get Mike Evans back. We saw signs of life from Russell Gage last week. Fournette will keep him honest. So I do like Tom Brady this week as a borderline QB1.
Yeah, I think it's a bit jarring to see Mahomes v. Brady on Sunday Night Football to be only a 45.5 total, where 48 was the average total last season. Same as last week, where Rodgers v. Brady was only 42, but these are kind of defensive teams at the moment. Kansas City has a better defensive DVOA than offensive, but I think that particularly Brady should be in a much better get-right spot. I think he's just a product of his context. He looks like he kind of did in 2019 with the Patriots, where he didn't have weapons. He still looks like the same guy. It's just guys aren't getting open. With Evans back, you would expect the ceiling to rise.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting, Kansas City allowing the 4th highest catch rate to wide receivers this season. Evans right back into your lineup.
All right, staying in this game with the Chiefs offense, we have two guys that I want to know if they are flex viable. Juju Smith-Schuster coming in as wide receiver 36 for you, and then, of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in as RB28 for you.
Yeah, so Juju I'm in on, right? I mean, again, I think that the way you attack Tampa Bay's defense is in the middle of the field. I mean, Dean and Davis have played really good on the perimeter, and so Juju, who has 75 or more yards and 8 targets in 2 of the 3 games that he's played so far this year. He had that dud against the Chargers, but that was a short week. Chargers are very good defense. So are the Buccaneers, obviously, as well. But his 18% target share ranks second on the team. He's not getting a lot of red zone looks, but I'm in on Juju this week. I am, however, out on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 8 carries or less in every game this year. He's been buoyed. Buoyed?
Buoyed.
Like
buoyed.
Buoyed.
Right?
Yeah,
Buoyed, whatever. He's been kept afloat. He's been kept afloat by his touchdowns, and he has the second most receiving yards among running backs. Having said that, though, Jerick McKinnon has played 11 more snaps than CEH. This is much more of a committee than I think the box score indicates, and I'm nervous about Clyde Edwards-Helaire because the Tampa Bays that we've talked about, Tampa Bay has really shut down pass-catching running backs.
Yeah, just one thing. If Kansas City, if they don't have a good offensive game, and it's the Bucs defense, so kind of measure a little bit, but they haven't been an amazing offense this year. So that's just one thing to watch with the absence of Tyreek Hill.
Speaking of an offense struggling that we usually have high expectations for, the Niners taking on the Rams defense. Everyone's been down so far for this offense. Now they're week 2 of Jimmy G starting the game. How do you weigh the Niners offense, especially Kittle and Debo right now?
I mean, I think you got to start him, right? I mean, you don't have a better option at tight end than Kittle. I know it's been, he's been injured and then bad week last week, but I think you got to start him. And Debo's been fine. 21 targets so far this season. Last 3 games against the Rams, by the way, 26.4 fantasy points per game. So even when they know it's coming, Debo still finds a way to produce. But everyone else, I sort of want to take a wait-and-see approach. I don't mind Jeff Wilson Jr. as a running back. He's had 100 total yards each of the past 2 weeks. He's getting a lot of work. So he's more of a lower-end RB2 for me this week.
Brandon Ayuk theoretically should be the guy who benefits most from Jimmy G coming in over Trey Lance. He was Jimmy's favorite red zone target, so he's another guy to watch. He got in the end zone last week as well, so just one guy who I think has some upside.
But are you starting Ayuk this week?
Not with confidence. I don't want really any part of these guys outside of Debo, and then you have to start Kittle and Wilson, but not expecting greatness.
Yeah, he's wide receiver 38 for me this week.
All right, one more break, and when we're back, it's time for Last Call. The NFL season is here, and the NBC Sports Predictor app is giving you a shot at winning $100,000 by entering Sunday Night 7's free contest between the Chiefs and the Bucs. So if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. It's free. Last call, guys. Essentially, Monday's headlines today. Yeah. Jay, I'll start with you. What do you
By the way, you can get mail here. I've just been to say this table has its own zip code now. So just so you guys know, after the show, we'll get you the...
Snuck one last one in.
One last one in.
See what he's got. Anything else?
Okay, you said Monday's headlines. Today is more of a Tuesday headline because the game is Monday night. But the Los Angeles Rams will take control of the NFC West. They will beat the San Francisco 49ers. They're plus 105 on BetMGM. Don't understand this line at all. The Rams should be favored. Don't care that Kyle Shanahan is 6-1 against Sean McVay. Those games included Nick Mullins and Jared Goff. And also, they included Trent Williams and an offensive line that is now 80% gone from last year. That might be a problem against Aaron Donald. I just think the Rams are the better team. Home field advantage is only worth 1.5 points in the NFL these days. And so by that, BetMGM, who right now has the line at 1.5, are saying these two teams are dead even neutral field. I don't believe that. I think the Rams are the better team. They should be pick or favorite.
I like that quite a bit. I always like anytime after week 3, anytime you get a team with a losing record that is giving points to a team with a winning record, give me the team with a winning record. I get, it didn't work out last night because the Dolphins were getting, but I think that bet would have paid off had Tua stayed healthy here. Same situation where the Rams have a winning record, but yet they're getting points from the 1-2 Niners. I'm with you on the Rams, and I also like the Broncos.
Yeah,
the Broncos are underdogs to the Raiders. Okay, very quickly, my Monday headlines today. CNBC has a big new huge hit. That's right, because Fantasy Football Pregame is coming to CNBC as well. You can the final hour, 12 to 1, will be simulcast on CNBC. And also, Alvin Kamara is back. Again, Vikings have allowed 85-plus scrimmage yards to a running back every game this season. Dump off Dalton, to me, gets the ball to Kamara. It's a big game without Michael Thomas there. This is the Alvin Kamara game we've all been waiting for.
What's your headline, Connor?
All right, one quick one from me. We have no idea what the Patriots are going to do at quarterback, but on the other side, I see Romeo Doubs getting his first 100-yard game.
Like that.
Romeo Doubs, you could trust him as a wide receiver 1 for Green Bay going forward. Sammy Watkins on the IR. Allen Lazard questionable every single week. This is the Doubs show going forward.
There you go. All right. For Jay Croucher and Connor Rogers, I'm Matthew Berry. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I'm talking to you, table. All right, we'll see you Sunday morning for Fantasy Football Pregame, 11 a.m. Eastern on Peacock. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.